Today we're taking a look at the third generation Universal Rundle Atlas toilet, offered around 1992. However, we're covering the redesigned version offered in 1995 to 1996, up until circa 2006. Not to mention that Crane Plumbing also sold this toilet as well. I feel like for open rims, this is probably the perfect toilet to start with. Let's see what this toilet has to offer. So the overall design of this toilet is nothing too special. It's kind of plain, honestly. Very simplistic design for a toilet like this. The trapway opening is a standard delta shape with an open slotted rim. As you can see, that covers the entire bowl. The tank parts are obviously replaced in this one, but they are pretty standard overall. The handle is replaced, the fill valve is replaced with the Fluid Master one, usually it has a ball cock, but the base and flapper look to be mostly original. Pretty standard parts and can be interchanged, so not much to be said here. Let's have a look at a flush. For the most part, the flush is okay. So the pulling and siphon power is not the greatest on these toilets. It's pretty 50-50. And this has to do with the last second pulling factor and siphon. As you saw towards the end of the flush, it starts pulling things down, but sometimes it can be a bit scuffed and very inconsistent with its siphons. So therefore, the pulling factor really is not the greatest. The performance is also not the greatest. While this does have a 2-inch trapway, the opening is a bit tight, and the trapway passages themselves, well, they look like that. So it's no telling that the performance is not the greatest. It's far from the worst, but it could be a lot better. Now let's have a look at boring. So it seems to be very inconsistent with most of these toilets. Yeah, for an open rim, that is pretty bad. With this particular one, you can tell that the back rim, these two parts right here, are missed. It's like they don't even exist. Meanwhile, it covers everything else pretty well, but the back rim has some problems. Usually it's either the back rim or this part right here which struggles with rinse. It's different per Atlas, which is very unfortunate. You would think for an open rim it would be a lot better, but no, it isn't. Here's another angle. And that is the third generation Universal Rundle or Crane Atlas toilet. A very interesting open rim toilet, but far from the best. This thing does have some upsides and is probably one of the better open rim designs, but it definitely has some weird drawbacks like the rim design, the performance, and the pulling factor, bringing it down a little bit. It's far from the worst toilet out there, but it definitely could have been a lot better. But let's put this toilet into the grading scale. Let's grade it. The overall design is very plain, but at least it doesn't look stupid compared to the prior design. So I give it a 5. Nothing special. The original parts for the most part are fine. They're simplistic for their time, but they can be interchanged at any time if needed. So I do appreciate that about it. I give it a 6 overall. The quality control for the most part is not the greatest. There are two problems I have particularly with this model. One, the inconsistent performances. The second one is the rim itself, preventing some rinsing in some parts. I have a theory on why that is, and that's probably because of either some minor blockages or manufacturing defects from the factory. Unfortunately, it's very inconsistent on most of these toilets. The round version mostly avoids this, but still can have this particular problem. It's mostly with the elongated that has these blockages, but that doesn't mean that the round ones can have it either. I give it a 5. It's not great. While the trapway is 2 inches, it doesn't look 2 inches. From the tight opening to whatever the trapway passages are, it's not a great design. I'm giving it a 4. The flush for the most part is okay. It can be somewhat inconsistent depending on the tank parts and, of course, the quality itself. But for the most part, out of all open rims, they tend to have the best flushes, with the round ones doing the best. I give the flush a 6. The pulling and siphon power is not that great. This is the case because the pulling and siphon is very last minute. and the siphons can be very inconsistent. I'm giving it a 5 overall. It's very underwhelming. The performance is also not the greatest either. While it's better compared to some other toilets from the timeline, it's still not that great compared to some other toilets. Due to its tight trapway and its weird passage design, it does impact the performance a little bit, and it's very inconsistent as well. Therefore, it only gets a 5. The ball rinse for the most part is not very good. Typically with elongated versions I've noticed is that the back right or the front right rims are usually blocked by something, either a blockage or a manufacturing defect. The round ones typically do the best, but still can have some problems. For an open rim, it's not good, and this particular example I'm using here is probably the worst example of bad ball rinse. It's still in the middle though, so I'm giving it a 5. The survivability for the most part is okay. It doesn't mean that they can't be replaced because I've seen a few being replaced, but there's still plenty that still exist. So for the most part, I'm giving it a 6. Now let's talk about the overall value of this toilet. Honestly, I was expecting a little bit better from this toilet, but it ended up being yet another jack-of-all-trades toilet, which is not something you want in a toilet. Typically, the round bowl versions are the best, typically have the better rinse and the better flush, with the elongated versions being quite in the middle, which is not a very great sign. And even then, the performance is not that great, the pulling factor is not that great, and other things are just not that great in general. While this is one of the quote-unquote better open rim models, it's still not that great. It still has its problems and ends up being a little bit underwhelming for a toilet like this, especially considering that you could have easily gotten a better toilet over this. To be fair though, there were worse out there, but still not that great of a toilet when you think about it. Overall, it's just eh. I give it a 5 in value. The final score of the 3rd generation Universal Rundle Atlas toilet, or Crane Atlas toilet, is a 52 out of 100. Overall, this toilet ends up being a lot more jack-of-all-trades than I thought it would be, which is disappointing considering I want to like this toilet, but generally speaking, it was definitely the most lackluster model of the past. Far from the worst be it, but there was definitely better out there. If only it wasn't so inconsistent.